Thank you for tuning in to the best parenting show on the internet, Post Daily Dose.
It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post. It's the Post. The Post Daily Dose. It's the Post. It's the Post.
Hey. Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Post Daily Dose. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 75. Tonight, we're going to talk about timeout sucks away your child's emotional security. I hope everyone has had a fantastic Saturday and so glad for you to be joining me. And thank you all so much for all of your continuous comments and shares and questions. Please ask more questions because oftentimes Big Papa comes up on the Post Daily Dose Hour and I am like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to talk about? So I love for you to share those questions. Hi, Mom. I always feel like when I see my mom pop up, I always feel like one of those NFL football players because I always wanted to be an NFL football player and I always wanted to be the dude who scored a touchdown. They don't do this as much anymore. That's an interesting thing. When was the last time you saw an NFL football player score a touchdown on television, look in the camera and say, "Hi, Mom"? They used to do that all the time when I was a kid growing up. They don't do that anymore. That is a very interesting thing for us to talk about at another time on another discussion. But for now, we're going to talk about timeout. So why does Big Papa say timeout sucks away your child's emotional security? So here's the thing. I'm going to take you way back. I'm going to take you back some 40 years ago. That would put me at about 5 years old. And I think I was in kindergarten then. I may have been 6. I don't remember when I was in kindergarten. Hi, Laura. And so the thing is, I remember there was a buddy of mine, and we grew up together. And so it's been a long time since I've seen Clint Dotson. But Clint, how are you, man? I miss you. I hope you're doing well. But I remember in kindergarten, I'm trying to think. I'm going way back in the inner recesses of my short-term memory, digging deep into my brainstem, because I filed this one away a long time. It's in the state level memory for sure. Mrs. Ernest, I believe, was my kindergarten teacher. I could be wrong. But for some reason, Mrs. Ernest... No, it was not Mrs. Ernest. Mrs. Ernest was my third grade teacher, and I really liked Mrs. Ernest. Oh my goodness. Mrs. Schmidt, I believe it was Mrs. Schmidt, was my kindergarten teacher, and Clint Dotson was hyperactive. Clint was a very smart young man, but he was very kinesthetic. I did an interview with a psychiatrist, actually. His name was Dr. Stephen Gafonte years ago. I'm going to have to find that and share that with you guys. But he says that most children diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, actually, the problem is that they're kinesthetic learners. Hi, Angel. They're kinesthetic learners. It's not that they're ADHD or ADD. It's that they have a different learning style. And the way education is set up these days, they don't address... Traditional schools, educational settings are not set up to address the needs of kinesthetic learners because a kinesthetic learner needs to move. They learn best through movement. They learn best when they are able to move. And so some years ago, some professionals started helping schools introduce the bouncing balls for students who were hyperactive because they could sit on the bouncing ball and they could bounce while they were learning. Well, they're kinesthetic. And so a lot of children who are diagnosed as ADHD in schools are actually kinesthetic learners. They have a different learning style, and that's just another way in which we miss the boat with those children. Well, Clint, bright young man, mechanically inclined, electrically inclined. He could work on stereo systems and work on motors and all kinds of stuff. As we got older, we got to be able to do some of those things. I didn't. I'm still mechanically inept. Not my thing. But I remember Mrs. Schmidt, Clint was getting up, running around, and Mrs. Schmidt put him in timeout, and we didn't call it timeout. See, but I want you to connect the dots. It was probably the naughty chair or the dunce chair. Some of you remember that. You don't have to share your age. That's okay. But some of you remember the dunce chair and the naughty chair. So Clint got put in the naughty chair. Well, he got up again. Well, he's ADHD, right? You can't sit still. Naughty chair, sit still? No. That requires self-regulation, which is the essence of self-control. A child who has poor self-control ultimately has poor self-regulation. It's no different with impulsivity. A child who is impulsive, they're impulsive because they don't have the regulatory functioning, the regulatory skill. It's not yet developed to help them regulate the impulse that comes from the amygdala. That's the whole definition of poor impulse control. You don't have the ability to regulate the impulse. And so Clint got up and kept running around. Now, I'm going way back, right? I'm going back right now. I'm going 40 years back. Mrs. Schmidt, so it was probably pretty stressful for me. And I'm sure I'd never talked about it because I'm a little kid. And that's something important to remember when it comes to children and how they process trauma. Children experience stressful things in schools all the time. But a lot of times they don't talk about them because they may not have the opportunity. They may have parents who work all the time, who come home, who are tired, and who just aren't tuned in and connected enough to be able to see a child who may be upset or may have something to share and be able to get to it and be able to receive it. So the child never processes it. And so Mrs. Schmidt tied Clint to a chair. She wrapped a rope around him in his chair to get him to be still. Now, if that happened this day and time, she would be fired and child welfare would probably be called in and would file charges against her, what have you, but probably never be founded because she was just doing the best she knew how to do to control the classroom. And controlling Clint was a part of controlling classroom. But when you don't understand stress, and when you don't understand regulation, you don't understand that controlling the classroom is about being able to influence the classroom. Controlling Clint is about having a relationship with Clint and understanding Clint well enough so that you can connect to him and give him the outlets that he needs to be able to excel with his special gifts and his special needs. So Mrs. Schmidt wrapped a chair around him. Now, I do it. Sometimes I do this in my lectures. Chair wrapped around his arms, right? Wrapped to this little wood chair. We're 6 years old, 5, 6 years old. Clint proceeded to stand up with the chair and hop around the room. Can you believe? Is that not that's so crazy, isn't it? He hopped around the room, and I remember it just as vividly as if it happened 10 years ago, because I don't have it clearly in my brain. But that I remember, he hopped, and then after that, I must have blacked out. I don't know what happened. But there have got to have been some, because I've got friends that I have known, and I still know, we still are good friends, dear friends, best friends that I've known that long, 40 years. My best friends I've known since we were infants. And so we go so far back. So I know that there's someone in my kindergarten class who can validate the story. So the thing is we then moved to first grade, right? In first grade, when we were in first grade and you got in trouble, you had to put your nose in the corner. Now, I know some of you remember having to put your nose in the corner. You may not remember the dunce chair because the dunce chair kind of went away. That's where you had to sit when you were being bad. You had to sit on the chair and you had to put the dunce cap on your head. We never saw a dunce cap, but I know some students did. But we had to put our nose in the corner. So that's first grade. Now, it changed in and out of there, but fast forward, 30 years. Okay, I'm graduate school, getting into parenting, working with families and parents and starting to, getting into social work and everything. And there's new phenomenon called timeout starts to come about. And some must have been a rocket scientist came up with this formula that for every age of your child, you give them 1 minute in this chair which is no longer in the corner. It's just set in an isolated way from everyone else. Who comes up with stuff like this? Like 1 minute for every age of every year of your child. Fascinating. So I bet the person who came up with timeout is like always putting their head down. That's kind of like Dr. Spock and letting babies cry themselves to sleep. So nothing has changed and so parents are still doing timeout. The nanny, who I think is absolutely adorable, is still having parents, when she was having her show, still having parents do timeout, putting their kids in the timeout chair. And this is far after the decade of the brain. When children are acting out, and the reason timeout sucks away your child's emotional security, sucks away your child's emotional security. You notice how I put that in the title. Timeout sucks, ... away your child's emotional security. I actually said that 15 years ago. God, I feel old sometimes when I'm talking about this stuff. Is because when children are stressed out, they act out. If a child is stressed out, it's because their stress is stronger than their regulatory ability. So this is the regulatory ability. This is the stress. A child with effective regulatory ability experiences stress and is able to maintain it. They're able to be somewhat flexible. Unless the stress gets too big, and then the stress shoots past the screen. It shoots past the regulatory ability. It shoots past the window of tolerance. And then it continues on. So young children are not fully equipped to be able to regulate their own stress. Now, this is important. I know for a fact, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about Don and Sandy and Clint's parents, because they're sweet, lovely people, and I love them dearly and grew up with them. But I know for a fact Clint was stressed out when he was a kid. He had 2 other siblings, which were pretty close to age to him, and he was the oldest. So they probably came along really fast. And so he probably had to grow up a lot faster than he was ready to grow up. And so that probably led to some delayed regulatory development. Now, you have to understand that the part of our brain that reacts to stress, our amygdala, completes its development by the 18th month. And this is in normal, healthy development. This is in normal, healthy development. We're not even talking about trauma. You start talking about children who grew up in an environment of trauma, or children who grew up in an environment of stress, adopted children, foster children. Well, that's probably far delayed. So that not delayed. The amygdala is far enhanced. So before 18 months, their amygdalas have been hyper developed because it's constantly activated. So the amygdala is like a muscle. But the part of the brain that's responsible for helping to regulate stress doesn't come online until the 36th month in healthy development. So in healthy development, by the time you're 3, and this is why you notice a shift with toddlers from 18 to 24 months, they have this heightened stranger danger. Right? So they don't want to go, and they could be going, people they've been around, even, dads. They don't want to go to them anymore. They cling to mom if mom is a primary figure. And so they go through that stranger danger for anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And then all of a sudden, they're making eye contact with you. They're smiling at you. And I just experienced this recently with a little cousin of mine. I've known him since he was a baby, loved him since he was a baby. Little Kyron, he's got these wonderful little cheeks. Little chocolate cheeks. And I mean, he's just been my little dude. And he's gone through this little stage where he had stranger danger. He wouldn't even want to look at me. But now it's like he's past that stage and he just turned 3 years old. And we were literally wrestling on the ground just a couple weeks ago. He was like charging me. It's because his hippocampus and his hypothalamus, the parts of his brain that help support healthy regulatory ability, have come online. So now they can regulate some of that stress. So the amygdala, I'm no longer as much of a threat to him as I used to be, because those parts of the brain. Well, he's a young man who comes from some pretty healthy development. Secure parents are always there, consistent. He's got older brothers and sisters. So he's got all these significant regulated care figures around him. But if you think about a child who doesn't have that, so a child who comes from trauma or a child who comes from a background of stress and maybe there's just conflict, well, their amygdala is overdeveloped and the hippocampus and the hypothalamus doesn't come online at 36 months. It might not come online until they're 5 years old. And then when it finally comes online, it's going to be deficient. Remember, oxytocin is a learned response. But guess what's been growing the whole time and getting bigger and stronger? Boom, the amygdala. So now you got a 5-year-old who's in this stressful environment called school. School is a stressful environment because it's sensory overwhelm. And I really want people to hear that. When I say school is a stressful environment, it's because of the sensory overwhelm. It's taking your little person and putting them in an environment with oftentimes a lot of stressed out adults, not always, but a lot of times a lot of stressed out adults and a lot of senses that are bombarding them all day long and they're expected to act like little adults. It's freaking stressful. And for some kids, unfortunately and sadly, it's traumatic. So the amygdala has been developed and the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, parts of the brain that help self-regulation are just now coming online. And so when the child gets stressed, the amygdala goes boom, and the hippocampus and hypothalamus completely get knocked offline. So then you have a kid who's acting crazy, and he starts acting crazy early in life. And then we have these techniques that we use, which then send the kid to the nose in the corner or send the kid to the dunce chair or ties the kid to the chair. And what they're not doing is they're not supporting the child's regulatory functioning. So there's no regulatory functioning getting supported for the child. So no one's coming in and supporting this. The kid just keeps going boom, bursting right through, boom, bursting right through. What has to happen, and this is why timeout sucks away your child's emotional security. Because when you send your child to timeout, you're essentially saying, son, Clint, you should control yourself better. Go over to that chair and calm yourself down and figure it out. That's completely a cognitive function. That's all left hemisphere, right? There's left hemisphere, which is your cognitive brain. There's right hemisphere, which is your emotional brain. Here's what a lot of us don't understand. Your emotional hemisphere actually controls your left hemisphere. Your emotional brain dictates your left brain, your thinking brain, your rational brain. So your emotional brain, anytime when you feel stress, it goes, and out goes your crazy thinking, right? Stress, out goes your crazy thinking. That's why when you send a child to timeout, you're actually engaging in a function. Well, there's two functions. The one function you're engaging in is you're expecting them to cognitively calm their stress down, okay? Now, two, you're giving them opportunity just to be more overwhelmed and moved into exhaustion. It's almost like letting a baby cry themselves to sleep. When you put a child in timeout, it's akin to letting them cry themselves to sleep. They need regulatory support. So when their amygdalas are hyperdeveloped and they come in here with their inadequate regulatory system, and that stress bursts through their regulatory system, you as the parent, as the adult, the teacher, the caseworker, the direct care worker, whoever you are, the grandma, the grandpa, you got to come in on top. And when that stress comes past their little ineffective regulatory system, bam! The big dog comes in. Boom! The big dog comes in. The big dog says, I got you, baby. I got your back. Grandpa ain't gonna let no stress get to you. School teacher ain't gonna let that stress get out of control. Mom ain't gonna let that stress take over. Big Papa's here. Big Papa's gonna regulate. So you try to regulate all you can, but just know Big Papa's right here with you, supporting you. I got your back. Right? And so then what you're doing in that process is that you're then teaching your child, you're giving your child's regulatory system an opportunity to be supported so it can grow. So it can grow and it can learn. And when you come in and support, instead of doing time out, you do time in. You say, hey, come hang out with me for a little bit. Or you say, hey, let's go. I'm going to let the assistant teacher take over the classroom for a little bit. Me and you, we're going to go run a special errand. We're going to walk hand in hand, across the playground, because the Little Red Schoolhouse is where I went to kindergarten. The Little Red Schoolhouse, I still got my diploma, baby. The Little Red Schoolhouse, still got my diploma. We're going to walk hand in hand. It was across this playground, big playground, to the main school. and we're going to pick up some papers. And as we're holding hands and walking, I'm regulating you because I can tell you're stressed. See, I see the stress. You're at home, your little one is stressed. Take him in the bedroom, close the door, lay on the bed, watch him play, just talk to him. You know, do some little stuff with him, clean up with him, play with him, you know, get him to come in with you, hug him, kiss him, love on him, nurture him. That's what helps children's regulatory systems build stronger. So I say, don't do time out, do time in, bringing the child into you. Now, there's one caveat to that, and that is if you are really stressed out as the parent, as the adult, it is your responsibility to take a time out. You can take a time out. You can say to your children, I am going to go in my room and I do not want to be bothered. I'll be back. I love you guys, but I need a break. And if I don't get this break, so help you, sweet baby Jesus, y'all better let me have this break. And they're going to let you have that break because they don't want nothing bad to happen. They don't want mama or daddy to be upset, so they're going to let you have that break. You're going to go in and you're going to take your 5-minute time out. Oh, if we go back to whoever the inventor of the creator of timeout was, shoot, let me get my 45 minutes. Because the good book of timeout says 1 minute for every year of age. Let me get my 45 minutes. I can get in a whole show on Netflix in 45 minutes. Shoot, I don't know what you're talking about. So we can let that stand for us adults, okay? But for your children, as long as you're regulating yourself, bring them into you. And here's my formula. You say to your child, hang out here with me. And because I can tell you're stressed, I'm feeling a little stressed. And when you feel better, you can go back and play. So you hang out with them, you interact with them, you engage with them, and you let them determine when they're feeling better. Because the majority of the time, they will stay with you 3 times as long as they would have if you would have given them a minute for every year. That is building their regulatory system. It's connecting you guys. It's building a relationship. It's lowering threat. It's lowering sensory overwhelm. It's helping them feel safe. It's doing all the good stuff. It's creating the magic. So that's why we're going to remove time out from our parenting lexicon. Okay, starting from this day forward, we're no longer going to use the word time out. We're going to just get rid of it. So your children, when they become parents, they won't even know what timeout. What? Time what? They'll know timeout for something that happens on the basketball court or the football field. But they won't know it for isolating children and separating them from their adult figures when they need them the most. Got it? I know you do. All right, everyone, remember, in any given situation, we always have 2 choices. You can continue to react from the same old imprints of stress and overwhelm, shock, fear, old imprints. You can keep doing that. It's unconscious. You just keep doing it. It doesn't require any thought. It doesn't require any effort. Just go on autopilot. Or you can stop and you can say, I want to do something different. Take 3 to 10 deep breaths. Slow down. Look around you. Get centered. Get focused. And then you choose love. And when you choose love, everything starts to open up in a different way. Doesn't always make it easier. Nothing I talk about is easy. It's very simple. It's just not easy. But you can choose love and have faith. You're going to get through it. Everything's going to be all right. So I hope everyone has a fantastic Saturday evening. Hope you do something fun with your families. Have a little more ice cream. Watch a little movie. Play a board game. Do something fun. Just relax. It's the weekend. And when you lay down tonight, lay down and have peace in your body and peace in your home. And I hope that you just wake up restored and refreshed and inspired. And you're full of gratitude. And just know that there is a hand. There is a hand over your home that has you. And Somebody's got your back. God bless you. We'll see you.